All right. Here I am. No headphones. That's how you know that Jim's not here, because I only put the headphones in to be able to hear Jim. But because Jim's not here, I don't need the headphones. We have our old screen. Remember when you would always do the live stream with this screen up, with the Panther-Lair logo and photos and everything over on the left side of the screen? It's kicking it old school. This is like the post-game shows, or when we used to do this live show before Jim started hanging out with us. And I enjoy having Jim on the show. It's fun to have another voice to talk to. I mean, I like having you guys all with your comments and your questions, but it's nice to have another voice to conversate with, as it were. But Jim's at the beach, so we're giving him the week off. He can just relax by the ocean. I'm going to go to the beach in a couple weeks, so that means there'll be like 6 commitments, 3 decommitments, and probably 1 or 2 guys get arrested. Maybe a coaching change. So mark that on your calendars. First full week of July, I'm going to go to the Outer Banks as we've done in the past. So we'll get all our food wrecks for the Outer Banks here in a couple weeks. But nevertheless, Jim, I hope, is enjoying himself on the beach, getting his toes wet, and we are going to talk a little Pitt sports here tonight. It's a Wednesday night. It's the Panther-Lair Show. It's youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. I'm Chris Peak from Panther-Lair.com. Been with Panther-Lair.com for a long time. I'll bring that up later. Somebody else pointed out a little bit of a timeline for us here, and it's a long one. But you know the website. You see it below. Don't click that. That's not a link. It's just a picture of the website address. So type that into your browser bar. Open another browser window. Don't open this one. Open another browser window over there and type in Panther-Lair.com so you can get all the Pitt sports info that you can possibly handle. The recruiting, football, basketball, and the message boards to talk to other Pitt fans all day, every day. Pitt fans hanging out. Panther-Lair.com. It's a fun place to be. And if you're a Pitt fan, that's a good place to hang out pretty much all day. And I think there are people on there all day long. I always say this. I always used to say it, like, before I go to bed at night, check the boards, just see what people are talking about, what's going on. Wake up in the morning, there's all new posts, there's all new threads, there's all new replies. It's always a living, breathing organism, the message boards at Panther-Lair.com, and you should be a part of it if you're a Pitt fan. Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. Everybody's starting to roll in, like getting people watching. You guys can jump in with your comments or your questions. Oh, well, as always, and I always like to say this at the beginning of the show when there's not that many of you watching. Like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. That's always a good thing for me to mention and remind you of. News, events, things like that. New commitment. Pitt got a commitment today, actually. Shawn Lee announced his commitment. Lee is an athlete from Harrisburg. Really, I mean, one of the best athletes in the state. I mean, you watch the highlight film and you're like, dang, look at this guy go. And he's making plays all over the place. And he's playing on both sides of the ball for Harrisburg. He's the quarterback. He runs the ball. And he's not just like a wildcat quarterback. He's not just piling. I think he rushed for 1,400 yards and like 19 touchdowns. But he's not just like piling up rushing yards as a wildcat quarterback. He's actually throwing too. He completed like 67% of his passes for 2,200 yards, 26 touchdowns, and 5 interceptions. Can you tell I just got done writing about this and talking about it? Yeah. Those numbers just roll off the top of your head sometimes. He threw for 2,256 yards while completing 67% of his passes for 26 touchdowns and 5 interceptions. You know, what are you going to do? He led the team in total offense with 3,700 yards of offense. I think he led the team in all-purpose yards because he had his 1,400 rushing yards, 14 receiving yards, and 72 yards on interception returns. He had 4 interceptions last year. By the way, he led the team in scoring. He led, just on the touchdowns that he scored, not even including the passing touchdowns. His 19 touchdowns and 4 2-point conversions. He led the team in that stat too. They all led the team in scoring. I mean, like, he did everything. I shouldn't say everything because Harrisburg is a really talented squad. But he is a really talented player. He's going to play cornerback at Pitt, and I think he's a huge grab. We list on Rivals. We list him at 6'1", 180, give or take a few inches. Is somewhere around there. But I think, it's one of these things where, like, if you take all the components that you can see, right? Let's say we don't know how tall he is, okay? Because you go back and forth on heights and weights and stuff. Self-reported height, sometimes can be inflated. But if you take, like, a guy who's, like, an uber athlete, one of the best athletes in the state, at a position where this staff has done really, really well identifying talent, coaching up talent, developing talent, you put that together, I mean, yeah, I'll take the odds on that one. You know what I mean? I think you have a pretty good chance of that one working out, and I think it's probably a pretty good chance that Shawn Lee will work out for Pitt. So Shawn Lee is a commitment number 13 in the class of 2025. Get your thoughts on him and what you think about the addition of Shawn Lee. I think he's a good commitment. They have 2 defensive backs now, and I think they're two of their best commitments in the class. Honestly, with Shawn Lee and Elijah Dotson, the 3-star safety prospect from Michigan, he's a high 3-star prospect. I think both of those guys, when you watch their film, you can make a pretty good case that they should be in 4-star territory. I think they are that talented, and I think they're good commitments for Pitt. I think they're good players for Pitt to get at positions where they've done really well. Look, here's some other stuff that, like, I know you're going to be like, I feel like when you say this, it means I'm probably going to read it in the 3-2-1 column on Friday. And you're right, because I was just researching some of these things. But in the Pat Narduzzi era, 9 years, you look at all the players they've had drafted. I think there's 28 drafted players. 5 are corners and 4 are safeties. So basically, like, on average, 1 defensive back drafted every year. On average. You know what I mean? Like, I guess, more or less. And that's pretty impressive. I think that's pretty impressive, and it's a testament to what we've all known and what we've all believed about Pitt's defensive back recruiting and defensive back coaching and defensive back evaluation and defensive back development. We've all believed it to be at a superior level, and I think those numbers sort of bear it out. Somebody asked in the chat, I can already see a question about the assistant head coach role and Corey Sanders. Look, if you watched my morning pit this morning about Corey Sanders getting promoted to the assistant head coach role, you know what I think about Corey Sanders. I think he's really, really good. We could talk about it in a second to answer the question about this. I think he's really good, and I think Pitt's safeties have been really good, and he's a big part of the reason why. And it's impressive to see what he has done. I mean, I think just when you talk about, because Corey Sanders was promoted to assistant head coach this week, and I think when you talk about, you can talk about the assistant head coach and what that role means, and I think it's very important, but it's not entirely related to on-field results. I think it's related to a lot of different things. But in terms of on-field results, all right, and I said this on the morning pit this morning, they're like, if you want to ask me, like, okay, Chris, you tell me Corey Sanders is a great coach and all this stuff, can you give me a concrete example of what he's done that makes him such a great coach? And I actually can. I can give you a concrete example of it. And the concrete example is this, that he went from having Jamar Hamlin and Paris Ford in 2019 and 2020 to Eric Hallett and Brandon Hill in 2021 and 2022, to Donovan McMillan and Javon McIntyre in 2023, and pretty much didn't miss a beat. I mean, I'm sure the coaches could point out little things here or there where Hill and Hallett didn't do it as well as Hamlin and Ford did, or McIntyre and McMillan didn't do it as well as Hallett and Hill did. But on the whole, the safety play has been, like, really good for the last 5 years. And shoot, the coaches might even point out that Paris Ford wasn't the most consistent player on the field, and that he often made mistakes, or occasionally made mistakes, that gave the other team big gains or touchdowns or things like that. But he was still a first-team All-ACC player in 2019. He was still really productive and explosive. And I'd like to think, that when he was making good plays, it's because he was doing what he was coached to do. But I still think if you look, every year that they were replacing starters, when it was like, oh, what are they going to do? How are they going to replace Hamlin and Ford? And at that point, Brandon Hill had already kind of stepped in for Paris Ford for the last few games of the 2020 season because Paris Ford left the team. But it was like, what are they going to do with brand new starters at safety? And Hallett and Hill ended up being awesome. You know what I mean? Hill was a second-team all-conference pick in 2021. Hallett was a second-team all-conference pick in 2022. He was also the ACC championship game MVP. And then those guys get done after 2022, and it says, oh, what are they going to do without Hallett and Hill? Donovan McMillan goes out and has 105 tackles. And he's an all-conference honorable mention. I think he kind of got jobbed on that, by the way, because I did a little research into that, too. There's only like 7 guys in the ACC who had 100 tackles last year. And like only one of them was a defensive back other than Donovan McMillan. It was Jonas Sanker from Virginia, and he ended up on the first team, all-conference first team. Cameron Kinchins from Miami was the first team all-conference safety because he had 5 interceptions. He led the league in interceptions. But you go down through the first team, second team, third team safeties, none of the other safeties had 100 tackles other than Donovan McMillan, and he ends up as an honorable mention. Now, I think there's some elements that go into that. It's, Pitt went 3-9. Donovan McMillan wasn't very well known coming into it, into the season and that kind of thing. And so maybe he didn't get quite as much attention as he should have. Either way, I'm getting far off track here. I'm not sitting here making the Donovan McMillan for all conference candidacy right now. But Donovan McMillan was really good last year. And I think Javon McIntyre played really well. And I think P.J. O'Brien was pretty good too. And so, twice you've had a transition of starting safeties where 2 guys with multiple years of starting experience move on one way or another. And you think, oh, you got to replace both safeties. How's that going to go? And it's gone pretty well. And when McMillan and McIntyre are done, when those guys move on, it's going to be Cruz Brookins and Jesse Anderson, who were like the stars of spring camp. And those were 2 guys that Corey Sanders recruited. I mean, he was the direct recruiter for those 2 guys, and he's been coaching them up and developing them for a year. And by the time they're starters, he'll have been coaching and developing them for like 2 years at least. And they're probably going to step in and be pretty good. So it's pretty remarkable. And I think it's a huge testament to Corey Sanders about the job he has done, that they've been able to segue so seamlessly. They've been able to transition so seamlessly from safety group to safety group to really where I would make a case that safety's probably been the most consistent position on the team under Narduzzi. I really think it has. And, it's just been really good because even if you go back before Hamlin and Ford, you're back to Jordan Whitehead. And yeah, like Terrence Webb and Dennis Briggs and Bryson Garner played a lot in those first few years. So, they weren't all, all-stars and future pros. But, like, if you look over the last 9 years of Pitt football and you look at the primary safeties, like, those guys, Garner, Webb, and Briggs, are like 8, 9, 10. Like, the safeties have been so good that, your first 7, you don't have a lot of complaints about those guys. If it's McMillan, McIntyre, in no order, McMillan, McIntyre, Hallett, Hill, Hamlin, Ford, Whitehead, that's 7 guys. It's a long time before you even get to those other guys you say, oh, yeah, but they also played them. And those guys were fine. They weren't exceptional. They weren't as good as those other 7 we're talking about, but they were fine. But I think safety has been maybe the most consistent position on this team. They've had 4 safeties drafted. I think they've had more all-conference selections at safety than they've had at corner. And just about any other position. The offensive line is the exception. And actually, when you talk about positions that they've had the most players drafted, they've had 6 offensive linemen drafted, I think, under Narduzzi. So you got a little bit more there. But they also have a lot more players to choose from, right? It's a bigger sample size. And so, percentage-wise, I think getting 4 safeties drafted over the last 9 years is pretty impressive, pretty good. And I think that number will climb. I think Donovan McMillan will get drafted. I think Javon McIntyre will have a chance to get drafted. And the pipeline looks strong behind them. So, basically just, rehashing. What's a nice way to say this? I don't want to say rehashing or regurgitating or recapping or repeating all the things that I said on the Morning Pit this morning, but I do think it's worth really considering how good the safeties have been, particularly in the last 6 years since Corey Sanders joined the staff. So I think any accolades he gets as a coach are well deserved. See a few comments and questions here. Josh Newark says, Chris, since Jim is at the beach, I have no issue with filling in for him. My cost shouldn't be an issue either. Unfortunately, Josh, we already got started, so I apologize. You're not going to be able to not going to be able to join us, but I appreciate the offer. I feel like you're here in spirit. Sophie Cox says, no offense to Jim, but I missed the solo shows. I appreciate that, and they're fun to do every now and then. It's nice to have someone to talk to also. Like, it's nice to not just be doing an hour-long monologue, occasionally reading, comments from the chat screen. You know what I mean? Like, it's nice to break it up. I think Jim has good insight, good input. I think he's funny, he's smart. He's a good guy to talk to, and so I like the energy he's brought to it. It's fun during the football season, I think, because you get the Wednesday night live show where it's the two of us hanging out, and then you get the post-game show where it's just you guys and me and a bottle of whiskey, and we just talk for a while. I still think about that Duke post-game where we just kept going. I think it was like 3 hours long. I never even got up to pee. I wondered what I would do if I had to go to the bathroom during that thing. If I would just be like, all right, you guys stay here. I'll be right back. Should I make like a sign that says like, be back in 2 or something like that? But never knew. And we were drinking, it's not like we were dehydrated during that show. Went a solid 3 hours though. That was fun. I enjoyed that. That was a good time. Although, I mean, the game wasn't good, but we had a good time during those 3 hours. So I think you get that mix during the season where you get me and Jim together on a Wednesday night, and then you get just me for the post game shows. It's kind of I like how that balances out. But Sophie, I appreciate you tuning in. It's always fun to have people on the joining us. Anthony Tennyson says, I love the new commitment, and I also love that Bub has been invited to be in the green room for the NBA draft. Yeah, this got announced about 40 minutes ago, somewhere around there. Pitt announced that Bub Carrington was invited to the NBA draft green room. First round of the draft is Wednesday, June 26th, so that's next Wednesday night, actually. Oh, we'll be live during that thing. I guess we'll be keeping an eye on the NBA draft, huh? There's a lot of guys that they invited. Some guys that certainly that we know, that we've seen, that Pitt has played against. I'm just kind of looking through the ACC players here. Jared McCain, Kyle Filipowski, Keyshawn George from Miami. I mean, obviously, you probably know most of these guys just from watching college basketball, but those are the ACC guys that are going to be there. I'll have to see what time the draft starts. I wonder if there's a start time here, because we might be live during this thing. I mean, it's next Wednesday night, right? And Wednesday night's the live stream night, so hopefully they don't start it at like 9 o'clock or something like that, and we can be live talking about when Bub Carrington gets drafted. Maybe we'll get Steven Gertz in here to give us some NBA specific insight. Steve knows what's going on. Maybe he can chime in and tell us how guys fit into the how Bub would fit in with the team he joins. That'll be fun. But yeah, congratulations to Bub. I think it's going to be fun to see what his NBA career becomes. Josh Newark says, not to dismiss the contributions of the assistant coaches, but how much is the title of assistant coach done to retain the best assistant coach on the staff? That's a good question. And I think from the outside, and I talked about this on the Morning Pit this morning, and so I'll kind of rehash a little bit of that. I think on the outside, you look at something like this. Oh, they gave him the assistant head coach title. Well, probably got a nice pay raise with that. Probably keeps him from going somewhere else. And sometimes those things kind of happen. I think when Pat Narduzzi gave the assistant head coach title to Charlie Partridge, and now with Corey Sanders, I think it's more than just that, though. It's not just a title. It's not just like celebratory. Or it's not just honorary. Like it's not just some fake thing that doesn't change anything. I think there really is something to that title and the responsibilities and respect that sort of come with it. I think, and I was asking around about this because I'm writing about this for the 321 column on Friday as well. And I wanted to make sure I had a clear understanding of the situation. And I think that the assistant head coach, it's not just an empty title. The assistant head coach is sort of a unique position on this staff because that coach has the latitude to walk into Pat Narduzzi's office and speak freely. You know, it's a permission to speak freely type of position, and maybe not one that has to ask permission to speak freely. I think it's one that can walk into the office and can say, "Coach, there's something you need to know about," or "Coach, there's something with the team I need to talk to you about. Coach, there's something you need to be aware of. Coach, there's something I think you need to deal with. Coach, there's something that needs to be this. Coach, there's something that needs to be that. Coach, you made a decision, and I think you might need to reconsider it. Or Coach, I think you're going to need to make a decision on this thing." And there are a million things that go into the operation of a football program. Everything from what happens on game day to what happens on a random Tuesday morning in April. And having someone who can come in to your office and say, "Look, I think you need to rethink this situation," or "I think you need to do this," or "I think you need to do that." It's important. Pat Narduzzi's a headstrong coach. He's very stubborn. And I think he's very convinced of his ways. To make Charlie Partridge the assistant head coach and then to make Corey Sanders the assistant head coach is Narduzzi saying, these are guys that I will listen to. That if these guys come in and tell me, you need to think about this, you might need to do this, you might want to look at that, Narduzzi's not going to be guaranteed to do it. He's not going to necessarily heed their advice, but they have the latitude and the expectation of walking in and saying those things, bringing those things to their to his attention. And I think one of the things that makes Corey Sanders such a good fit for this, and I think Charlie Partridge as well, is that Corey is a pretty straight shooter. I think he's very reasonable. I think he's really smart. I think he knows the game. I think he's smart in that level, but I think he's got a great feel for just sort of things. I could see him being a guy who's got a great feel for the staff, for the players, for the team, for just kind of what's going on with the team, that he can come to Narduzzi and say, there's something you need to do here. And then at the same time, it also can be, the assistant head coach, I think, can be a sounding board of sorts. That if Narduzzi is trying to figure something out, he can say, Corey, I'm really thinking about doing this. But then I wonder if maybe I should do that. What do you think? What do you think I should do? Do you think this is going in the wrong direction? Do you think this needs to happen? Do you think that needs to happen? And I don't think he's going to go to every coach on the staff about that. But the assistant head coach is the one that he will go to. And so I think there's a lot of respect in that position. And for Pat Narduzzi to make Charlie Partridge the assistant head coach, and then once Partridge left, to make Corey Sanders the assistant head coach, I'm sure there was a raise that came along with it. I'm sure it's going to help keep Corey Sanders around at Pitt for a little while longer. And I think he is a rising star in the coaching industry. I think he is on his way to being a defensive coordinator and eventually a head coach. So this job title will keep him here for a while. But it's not just that. It's not just securing a rising star in the coaching industry. It's not just holding on to one of the better coaches on your staff. It's getting a guy that you respect and trusting them with this position to be an assistant head coach, and it's not assistant to the head coach, it's assistant head coach. And congratulations to Corey. I think he earned it. I think he deserves it. And I think if you had asked me who on the staff do I think should replace Charlie Partridge as the assistant head coach, that if somebody's going to be the new assistant head coach, who do I think it should be? I probably would have picked Corey, because I think Corey Sanders is pretty good in that role, or will be good in that role. Josh Newark says, Chris, what would you put on the inside of your suit tux jacket if you were in the NFL NBA draft green room? On the inside of my suit tux jacket? Like the lining? I don't know. Whatever lining Macy's puts in their suits these days. I don't know. Lining? I have no idea. Like a special logo or something? You see what I'm wearing right now, right? It's a Pittsburgh Phantoms t-shirt. So You're not exactly talking to a guy with a strong fashion sense, Josh. You should know this by now. You've watched enough of these videos to know that I'm not the most well-dressed guy. Hogmuncher says, any insights into the official visits this weekend? Feels like we're due for some more offensive line commitments, but haven't heard or seen anything concrete. They have one offensive lineman coming in this weekend, Torian Chester. He's an offensive tackle prospect from Georgia. From everything we can tell, he hasn't taken any other official visits. So that's it would seem like they'll have a good chance there. You know, we kind of picked up that they want to take. They have one guard committed in Shep Turk from Thomas Jefferson. They have one tackle committed in Akram El-Nagmi from England. And they want to take one more at each spot. One more guard, one more tackle. Torian Chester, we list him at like 6'5", 320. So, I don't know, maybe tackle, maybe guard. But I think they'd like one of each. But that's all they've got coming in this weekend that we know of right now, as of 8:20, whatever it is, p.m. on Wednesday night. Each of the last two official visit weekends, there's been a surprise visitor who came in. It was Julian Anderson, who ended up committing 2 weeks ago, and Akram El-Nagmi, who ended up committing last week. So they brought in a surprise visitor each of the last 2 weekends, and they've gotten that surprise visitor to commit each of the last 2 weekends. So we'll see what they're able to pull out of their hat this weekend, see if they have another rabbit in there. It's somebody they can also get to commit. But, yeah, I think they want a 4-man offensive line class. I think they want 2 tackles and 2 guards. They've got one of each, so they need to add one more of each. I see them being in with more guard prospects than tackles, but they got to go find somebody. And ideally somebody who's been playing American football longer than 2 years. Although I like the potential of Akram El-Nagmi, you don't want to have a whole class full of guys who have only been playing football for 2 years. You don't want to have a whole class full of lottery tickets. In some cases, you just want some cold, hard cash, right? Voodoo IPA wants to know, did you really see the Pittsburgh Phantoms? They only existed for one season in 1994, long before you were an undergrad. Well, I was an undergrad in 1997, so it wasn't that long ago, or long before I was there. But no, the Pittsburgh Phantoms, they're like a hockey team, right? I guess because this Phantom has a hockey stick. This shirt was from Steel City. You know, Steel City t-shirt company. Great local company. My favorite local t-shirt company. This shirt came from them. I've had this for like years. Just don't wear it often. It's why it's still in really good shape, because I don't wear it all that often. But I love this shirt. It's a great shirt. I don't know if they still sell this, or maybe this is one of their like their t-shirt club or something like that. But no, I did not see the Pittsburgh Phantoms. If it was 1994, it was 3 years before I moved to Pittsburgh. So you're right. I don't have any frame of reference, but I really like the shirt. It's a cool shirt, right? And Steel City does a great job with that stuff. Josh Newark says, you once left the stream running for an extra 30 minutes. No worries about bathroom breaks in the middle of a 3-hour stream. No, I mean, if you're talking about that one time where I was just sitting here, it wasn't a half hour. It was only a few minutes. Get out of here. When was that? The power go out or something that night? I forget when that was. We killed the live stream. But anyway, I don't think it was. Was there another time I left the stream running for 30 minutes? I don't think there was. But if you say so, Josh, I'll take your word for it. You would know. You probably would know better than me. Adam Vinchik says, was the new pat signal for Shawn Lee? Yeah, I think it was. Shawn Lee announced his commitment today. The Pat Narduzzi Pitt is it tweet came out today. And if you count them up, and I actually went back and counted them up, there have been 13 Pat Narduzzi Pitt is it tweets for the class of 2025. It all lines up with the commitments that they've gotten. And so, you know, I still have people telling me that Shawn Lee actually did commit over the weekend, just didn't announce it till today. But either way, I think the Narduzzi tweet today was Shawn Lee committing. It wasn't another commitment on top of that or anything like that. I think it was Shawn Lee committing. So 13 Narduzzi tweets, 13 commitments, all parties accounted for, and one official visit weekend to go. TRR says the assistant head coach needs to be a bad cop too. Joe Moore was assistant head coach under Foge, and the players walked all over him as well. Hopefully the players fear Sanders. So, I tend to think of the assistant head coach role. I tend to think of that more in relation to what it means for Pat Narduzzi and less about that coach's interactions with the players. I think it's more about how that coach interacts with Narduzzi, what he says to Narduzzi, what he means for Narduzzi, and that kind of thing. A sounding board, suggestions that, and almost could be a liaison between the staff and the players and the head coach. Kind of go between the head coach and everybody else. And not entirely that, but I tend to think more about assisting the head coach rather than being another head coach for the rest of the team, if that makes any sense. Because he's still coaching safeties. I mean, he's still the safeties coach. And the good thing about Corey, and I've picked up on this by observing him, I've watched him coach countless practices and prospect camps and things like that. I mean, he's a nice guy. He's a genuinely nice guy. He's a good guy. And he's reasonable with the players. But he can turn up the heat when he needs to turn up the heat. He can push them when he needs to push them. He can get on them when he needs to get on them. If he needs to be hard on the players, if he needs to ride them a little bit, if he needs to really get after them, he does. But he also is very businesslike and very professional about it. I don't recall too many times of seeing him just go into a tirade and things like that. But the guys pick up when his intensity turns up. They pick up on that. And I think they respond to it well. And so I think he's really good with that. I think he's good with the players. He's really good with the players. And I think he's really good on the recruiting trail as well. So, and again, he's a smart, respectable guy, which helps, I think, helps him for this role of being Narduzzi's assistant, the assistant head coach, not just the assistant to the head coach. So I think he's an ideal guy for that role. I really think it fits well. What's interesting? I'll just bring this up now before we continue to talk about recruiting. And maybe this will, maybe you'll have questions about this. Somebody on the message boards pointed this out. Today's June 19th, 2024. If you look on the message boards, if you look at my profile on the message boards, you look at a post that I posted there, you just look over there. It tells you how many posts I've made, how many messages I've posted, and maybe my last activity or something like that. But it also tells you when I registered my account. It tells you when that user registered his account. And I have, for the record, 75,570 messages. So I've posted a lot on the message board over the years. But the registration date for my account on Rivals.com network is June 19th, 2004. This is something of a 20-year anniversary, I guess, right? So we should drop the confetti. 20 years that I've had this registered account on the Rivals.com network. Now, I haven't necessarily been writing for Panther-Lair.com for 20 years. If I recall, I first signed up for that account on the Rivals.com network because I had to research West Virginia recruiting. I was doing some freelance work occasionally for this for the Pittsburgh Sports Report. If you remember that free newspaper, you could find in like various restaurants and stores around town. And I was doing some freelance stuff for them, and they asked me to do like a recap of West Virginia recruiting or something, or whatever it was. And so I signed up. And I registered for the account then. And then, ended up like covering that ensuing like fall 2004 Pitt football season for Pittsburgh Sports Report. By the end of that fall, I said, hey guys, do you have anything full time? I'd like to do this like all the time if I could. And they were like, well, we don't, but you might want to go check out this website, this Panther-Lair.com. Dun, da, 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 the rest is history, right? Stop delivering pizza. Well, I probably still continue delivering pizzas for a little while, till I made this into a full-time gig, and ended up, I was able to stop delivering pizzas at that point. I don't recall my first article that I ever wrote for the website. I remember one of the first things I really did for Panther-Lair.com was I covered signing day in the South Side, the National Letter of Intent signing day press conference. I remember being there at spring camp in 2005. I remember the first game that I ever covered for Panther-Lair.com was the Notre Dame game in 2005. Yeah, that was a bad one. And you know what? There were a lot of bad ones over the last 20 years. And there were a lot of good ones over the last 20 years. And there was a whole lot of mid. That's what kids say. See, even though I've been at this job for 20 years, I can still say cool kid stuff like mid. But 20 years. It's been a long time. I don't know if I thought I was going to be doing this job for 20 years, but I can't necessarily complain. I'm not going to complain because it's pretty good gig to have, and pretty fortunate to do it. And I appreciate that we've been able to expand and do things like this, do videos, do podcasts, and just generally have some things outside the, beyond what we started off doing 20 years ago. We were just writing articles about recruits all the time, and trying not to say we when we referred to the home team. I feel like we've come a long way, and we keep going. We keep growing, and we look forward to see what the next, I don't know about the next 20 years. Am I going to do this until I'm 65? Well, look at me being optimistic, about living for the next 20 years, let alone college football existing in something even somewhat recognizable for the next 20 years. But anyway, it's been 20 years. It's pretty remarkable. I didn't notice it. Somebody else pointed it out. I really had no idea that was an anniversary of sorts, but here we are, 20 years in with Rivals.com. Cheers to me. I should have got the whiskey out for this one, but it's a Wednesday night. It's a school night, guys. We're not going to do that. Adam Vinchik says they should try Shawn Lee on both sides of the ball like they did with Jordan Whitehead. I would say why not? And the guy's a playmaker. You know what I mean? Like, I saw his I had his stats open earlier. I might have closed it. I forgot his yards per carry average and what he would do with the ball in his hands. But, I mean, he's impressive. He's a great playmaker. He scores a ton of touchdowns. I think he's going to have a great senior season at Harrisburg. And, I know the coaches want to, when they have a guy like him, and they said this with Jordan Whitehead too, they wanted to spend as much time as they could teaching him the defense, getting him to learn the defense so he's ready to play the defense, so he can get on the field sooner there. But look, you can figure out a couple sweeps. They figured out a couple. Jim Chaney figured out a couple sweeps for Jordan Whitehead, and ended up, getting something out of him as a true freshman. I think you can teach a guy to run two types of sweeps, and it won't take away too much time from him learning the defense. So I would look into it. I would consider Shawn Lee to play at least a little bit of offense. Although obviously the priority is going to be on defense. This official visit weekend coming up. So it starts tomorrow, runs through Saturday. This is the final official visit weekend of June. And it's not looking like a big one. It's looking kind of small, actually. Like maybe 7 guys. And we're going to go through and pare down the list that we have on Panther-Lair.com tonight. I know there are Panther-Lair.com users who are watching this video. They're like, dude, there's like 13 names on the list. Yeah. We got a bunch that we're going to trim down. And I don't know if all of those are Pitt saying no thank you, or it's the kids saying no thank you. But to me, in June, bring in as many guys as you can. I mean, realistically, bring in as many guys as you can. There's no reason to limit yourself. Like, I know you may have priority targets. I know you have spots that you want to fill. I know you have this guy that you want or that guy that you want, and so you don't want to, overdo it, or I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what some of the rationale is. Are you worried about your priority targets getting lost in the shuffle of you bring in 18 guys and your top guys, they might get lost in the shuffle a little bit. You can't give as much individualized attention. Is that the concern? Are you worried about other guys trying to commit and taking those spots? Is that the concern? I don't know what it is, but if the current numbers that we're hearing of them maybe only having 7 official visitors this weekend, if that holds, you're looking at 29 official visitors for the month of June. For comparison, they had 24 official visitors last June on the first weekend. Pause for dramatic effect. We're looking at 29 for the entire month this year, 24 for just one weekend last year. And that's, is that the reason they ended up signing 4 4-star prospects last year and they don't have any committed yet this year? No. But I think with the way recruiting is, with NIL and the transfer portal and all the different things that are changing and, twisting and screwing up the, roster management, with all of that at play, you might as well cast a wide net, and take a bunch of commitments. And the other thing too is they have over the past, since these June official visits started, gotten the bulk of the class by the end of the summer. Now right now they're sitting at 13 commitments. Maybe they'll get up to 19 by the end of the summer, and that's not that's not a problem. But you don't want to take too much time. You don't want to, that's not what I want to say. You don't want to rely on the fall and winter for getting more than 5 commitments. You want to have the bulk of your class filled by the end of July. By the end of the summer. Knowing that you're going to lose some guys to decommitments, that's going to happen. There are going to be flips. You're going to have guys who take off. That's part of it. But you would like to be as close to 20 as possible by the end of the summer, partially so you're prepared for that. So if you lose a couple guys, you're only down to 17, whereas if they lose a couple guys right now, they're down into single digits. But you want to be as close to 20 as you can so that you're, in the fall and December, you're just trying to top off the class. You're not trying to build the class. You just want to top it off. And you only have limited opportunities. This staff and a lot of coaching staffs don't like to do official visits during the season for a lot of reasons, mostly because coaches feel like they can't spend a lot of time with the kids because they're so busy with Friday night walkthroughs. Saturday is just game day. There's so much going on. And then Sunday, is that it? Is that all the time you get to really spend with the kids? So they don't like to do official visits in the fall. And there's only a couple weekends in December before you get to the signing day. And so if you go into the fall, if you come out at the end of summer and you only have 14 commitments, I don't think you're setting yourself up to do very well in finishing out the class. And so you need to get a lot of commitments in the month of June. It's harder to do that if you don't bring that many guys to campus. Now, maybe you say, look, dude, we're only going to bring 30 guys to campus because we know we're going to land 17 of them. Okay. Good. If you do that, if you could pull it off. I'm not entirely sure that they could pull it off. Now, they're at 13 right now. So is it conceivable they could get 4 more out of this month? I guess. Could they get 5 more out of the guys that visited this month? Could they get 6 more by the end of the summer? I guess it's possible. So I don't want to pull I don't want to, hit the panic button too soon on this. But I just don't see, there's a thumbs up. I didn't realize I was sitting there like that. I just don't see any reason to limit yourself and limit the number of guys you have coming in. I think you want to, like I say, you want to cast a wide net. And you want to have as many guys come in as you possibly can. I think. Guys that you're legitimately interested in. And might you end up in some situations where you have to slow play guys or hold guys off because you think your primary target's about to commit, and so you don't want this secondary target to try and commit and take the spot? Yeah, that's probably going to happen. It's probably going to happen no matter what. But I think you need to, if you miss out on your priority guys and you didn't bring anybody else in, as a backup target, now who are you going to turn to when your priority guys go somewhere else? Kind of stuck a little bit. And if you're stuck now, you're going to be really stuck when you get to December. So I don't really understand the low numbers. I'm not sure why they wouldn't bring in more guys, but that seems to be the decisions that they're making. Let's see. You guys are in a conversation about places to go in Oakland. Josh Newark says my son is taking a college tour of Pitt next Tuesday. What's a go-to lunch place in Oakland to seal the deal for him? Paul Sebastian, who I think is a bit of a culinary whiz among us, I know this, says Butter Joint and Sidecar in North Oakland are a good dinner and breakfast spot. Also, Pamela's is right on campus, is a Pitt breakfast staple. Yeah, I agree about that. And Peninsula P mentions Permanis. That's still there. I honestly don't know what's there. I think the place I've eaten at the most, and I think I've eaten there twice, was Stacked. That was fine. It was burgers. You know what I mean? Like, my son really liked it because you could, it's one of these places where you get the paper and you check off all your toppings and things you want on your burger, and he got really excited because he could check off potato chips, and now he just thought that was the greatest thing. He could put potato chips on his burger. So, Josh, if your son likes potato chips on his cheeseburger, that might be the place to take him. But I don't know. I don't know what to recommend to people in Oakland anymore. I really don't. I think is there a Millie's ice cream across the street from like where Fuel and Fuddle and Uncle Sam's were? That's pretty good. But like, all the places I used to go are gone. All the places a lot of you guys probably used to go are gone. Like I said, I started writing for this site 20 years. I had been out of college for a few years by the time I started writing for this site 20 years ago. So you're talking about stuff that was there 25 years ago. Are the things that I, am familiar with, or the things that resonate with me, the places that formed a strong memory for me. That was 25 years ago. And there's been a lot of changes in that neighborhood. So I don't have a lot of good recommendations. I apologize for that, Josh. Let's see. So, yeah, official visit weekend looking like about 7 guys. Elijah Dotson is already committed to Pitt. He's going to be coming in for his official visit. He's one of the better visitors this weekend, I think, in terms of prospects. I think he's really good. I think he should be a 4-star recruit. I think we've got him rated as a high 3-star right now, but I think he should be a 4-star. So Dotson's coming in. Mason Alexander, a 4-star defensive back from Indiana. Looks like he's probably going to come down to Pitt and Purdue. He took an official visit to Purdue already. He'll take his official visit to Pitt, and that'll be that. It looks like that'll be it for his visits, unless he's planning to take more into the fall. He didn't really give me any indication that that's his plan. So it could come down to Pitt and Purdue. Purdue is a good school for defensive backs. Their head coach, is the guy that Pitt went head to head with for Coy Beasley last year. Felt like they had Coy Beasley, and then Beasley ended up going to Purdue because of the head coach and his success with defensive backs. So it's a tough school to recruit against for that position. But Pitt obviously has a lot going for it as well, with another DB drafted this past year. Like I say, to get it up to now 9 defensive backs over the last 9 years. It's pretty good numbers. Elsewhere, there's a running back from Georgia, Sinquan Smith. I think is a guy to keep an eye on. He's a real interesting guy. He has only taken one other official visit. He went to Georgia Tech. I think Pitt's got a great chance of holding on to him, or landing him, I should say. I think Pitt's got a great chance of getting a commitment from Sinquan Smith. We'll see what he ends up deciding to do, but I think they're going to be right there in it with him, and I wouldn't be surprised to see him pull the trigger this weekend. Elsewhere, there's a couple wide receivers. Emmanuel Taylor, who's actually like the biggest wide receiver visiting Pitt this month. He's actually a guy who's over 6 feet tall, which is kind of unique. If you look at Pitt's kind of unique if you look at Pitt's wide receivers right now, the guys they've targeted in the transfer portal and in recruiting. Emmanuel Taylor's kind of big. He's about 6'1", 6'2". He's only taken one other official visit, and it was Western Kentucky. They also have Khalil Sterling, another wide receiver, a kid from Miami. He's a little bit smaller, like some of the other guys that they've taken. He hasn't taken any of the official visits as far as we can tell. So there's an option possibility there, I would think, as well as with Denham Cook, a linebacker from Ohio. I think you got a chance there to see some commitment. So I think this weekend will be a little bit more productive immediately in terms of commitments, more so than last weekend where they got the one commitment over the weekend. Shawn Lee ended up committing a few days later, so they got 2 commitments out of the weekend, but they really just got one immediate weekend commitment. You know what I mean? And that's what's always exciting about the official visits is when you get those immediate weekend commitments. They got 1 last week. They got 5 the week before. They got 1 last weekend. That's not what we've typically seen. I think, if you go back to 2000, it was June of 2018. It was a recruiting class of 2019. So June of 2018. Since then, they've had, I think, leading into this year, 14 June official visits, like 14 June official visit weekends. And they've gotten multiple commitments, multiple immediate commitments out of like 12 of those 14. So more often than not, a lot more often than not, they've gotten multiple immediate commitments out of June official visit weekends up until last weekend when they only got 1. I think they'll get multiple this weekend. I don't think it'll be a 1 commitment weekend. I think they'll get a number of these guys. I think there's some good candidates in there to join the recruiting class. And we can talk about how good those guys are and whether they're good additions or not or whatever once they actually commit. But there should be commitments that come out of this weekend, I would think. Last week, I think Jim predicted 2. I would probably predict more like 3 or 4, which would take some of those number concerns, some of the quantity concerns we talked about earlier with the class, at least alleviate those a little bit. All right, some questions before we head out of here. Paul Sebastian says, Chris, will the starting quarterback have a short leash this year, or will he get the same treatment like last year? Last year was such an anomaly, Paul, that it's hard for me to compare anything to that, right? Frank Signetti was so dug in on Phil Dracovic, looking, playing the best football of his life, looking better than he's ever looked, being a great fit and all this stuff. He was so dug in on it that he was never going to come off of Dracovic. He was never going to bench Dracovic. And it took Narduzzi finally stepping in to get anything to happen. So the question really, I mean, there's a couple questions. On one hand, we're not really sure because the connection between Cade Bell and Nate Yarnell is not what the connection was between Frank Signetti and Phil Dracovic, right? I mean, there's two very different situations. But one big question is, and this is sort of in line with what you're asking, and it might be the question that you're intending to ask, will Pat Narduzzi be inclined to step in sooner? Will he not sit back and just watch a disaster unfold for as long as he did last year? And last year, he sat back and watched a disaster unfold for far too long. I don't know if he would admit that. I don't know if he would acknowledge that. I don't know if he would say, yeah, I really needed to make a change sooner. I don't know if he would say that. But we know it, right? We all watched it. We all sat through it. We all suffered through it. Pitt suffered through it. Pitt went 3-9 because the quarterback play was so bad. And because Pat Narduzzi wouldn't step in and say, this has got to stop. I don't care if we just run the Wildcat. We can't keep doing this. But it took until after 5 games for Narduzzi to finally do that. So the question ultimately is, will Narduzzi move quicker if things start going bad again? And I don't know. I don't have an answer to that. He's got a new offensive coordinator. I'm sure he trusts Cade Bell to make those decisions. I'm sure he's going to want to be as hands-off as possible. But I don't know. I don't know what he's going to do. I'll say this. I don't think Nate Yarnell is going to need as short a leash as Phil Dracovic needed, as Christian Bear ultimately ended up needing. I don't think he's going to need as short of a leash. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. Let's see. TR says, any predictions on the carry distributions for the running backs? This is one of the most interesting questions. I think it's so interesting to look at. I think it's going to be really interesting to watch. It's going to be really interesting to see how it unfolds. I still think Rodney Hammond is the number one back, but I have no idea behind that. I don't think they'll rotate running backs during a possession quite as much. I think guys will have a whole series or a whole drive. But I don't know who will be the guy who comes in after Rodney Hammond. It could be Desmond Reed. It could be Derek Davis. I think it'll be one of those two guys. But I don't know. I don't know what Desmond Reed... Like, Desmond Reed, to me, is one of the more intriguing guys on the team just because Pat Narduzzi has talked him up so much this offseason, and he obviously had a lot of success in Cade Bell's offense before. I just don't know how it's going to translate to the ACC. I'm just really curious about that. And that's not to say that I think it won't translate to the ACC. It's just to say that I don't know how it will translate to the ACC. And I'm really, really interested to find out. He'll play. I think he'll play a lot. I think he'll get a lot of carries. I don't think he'll necessarily, pass over Rodney Hammond. But I think he'll play a lot, and he'll get the ball a lot, and he'll get an opportunity to play. I think Derek Davis is really intriguing too. I've been looking forward to seeing Derek Davis get an opportunity for a while. I don't know about his sort of, cutting and juking and all those things, but he's definitely got home run hitter speed. So I'd like to see him get a chance to hit a couple home runs, So I'm not sure. I'm not sure what the carry distribution will be. I think there'll be a lot of guys who carry the ball. I don't know what percentage RB1 is going to get, and I don't know who's going to be RB2, 3, and 4. Let's see. Last couple things here. Oh, man. We only got a couple minutes here. Paul Sebastian asked a big question about the last 20 years. Listen, Paul, hold on to that question. Ask us next week. I don't think we have enough time to answer that one tonight. But Stashy asked, haven't been around for a while. How is Julian Duggar transitioning? I think Julian Duggar's done about what you would expect a true freshman quarterback to do. I think it was good for him to enroll in January and get to be a part of the team early and join the team for spring camp and get that coaching and get that work in. But he's a freshman. He's a guy who right now should be just starting to enroll. He's a guy who during spring camp should have been moving through the second semester of his senior year of high school, and getting ready for prom. That's what they always say. And instead he was playing college football. And I think that was good for him. I think it helped his development. He's got some work to do, but he's got some time. I mean, there are guys who can play. There's Nate Yarnell. There's Eli Holstein. He doesn't have to be ready to play this year, and that's a good thing for him. So I think time will tell. I liked what I saw out of some of the stuff we were able to see from him in practice, but time will tell what he's really able to do and what he can grow into. All the physical skills are there though. All the physical traits are present. All right, I think we're just about out of time here. It's 9 o'clock. I appreciate everybody who tuned in tonight. We missed Jim, but we'll have him back next week, and we'll look forward to that. Thanks, everybody, for your comments and questions. Make sure you like this video and subscribe so you don't miss any of our Pitt video content at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, and check out the website Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com, for all of the Pitt sports coverage you can handle. Football, basketball, and recruiting, it's all at Panther-Lair.com, and message boards to interact with hundreds and thousands of other Pitt fans. All day, every day, Pitt fans are talking to each other at Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. Thanks so much for tuning in tonight. Thanks for everybody being in the chat. It was always fun to do. We appreciate it. And, have a great Wednesday night. We'll have an official visit preview for you tomorrow on the Morning Pit, and we'll have another live stream on next Wednesday night and Morning Pits every day of the week. You know what we do. It's all right here. youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.